In a quiet coastal town, healer Imani Rhodes meets scarred billionaire Dorian Ashford. But as secrets, betrayals, and heartbreak surface, will love be strong enough to rise from the ashes? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The gentle crash of waves against the shoreline greeted Imani Rhodes as she unlocked the door to her small apothecary shop. Healing Hands read the hand-painted sign that swung in the salt-tinged breeze. At 28, Imani had hoped to find peace in this quiet coastal town of Seabreeze, North Carolina, far from the hectic pace of Atlanta and the memories of a relationship where she'd given everything and received nothing in return. "Morning, Mrs. Halsey," Imani called out with a warm smile as an elderly woman approached the shop. "I've got your arthritis balm ready." "Bless you, child," Mrs. Halsey said, her wrinkled hands clutching her purse. "These old bones wouldn't make it through winter without your magic," Imani laughed. "It's not magic, just nature's gifts mixed with a little love." After Mrs. Halsey left, Imani stood behind the counter, absent-mindedly arranging jars of dried herbs. 6 months ago, she'd been sitting in a corner office in Atlanta, creating marketing campaigns for luxury brands she could never afford. 6 months ago, she'd still believed that Mark would finally see how much she was worth, that after 3 years together, he might actually put her first, just once. The memory of finding him with her co-worker still stung, but not as badly as his words. "You're just too much, Imani. Always trying to fix everyone, always giving. It's exhausting." She shook her head, pushing the thoughts away. That life was behind her now. This shop, these healing remedies, this was her future. The bell above the door jingled, and Imani looked up to see Betty Tucker, the town's unofficial historian and most enthusiastic gossip. "Have you heard?" Betty asked, not bothering with a greeting. "There's movement up at Ashford Manor. A delivery truck went through those gates for the first time in months." Imani raised an eyebrow. "Ashford Manor? The big house on the cliff?" "The very same," Betty nodded eagerly. "Such a tragedy. What happened to that family?" "The fire took everything, their summer estate. Poor Mr. and Mrs. Ashford. Left that boy scarred inside and out." "What boy?" Imani asked, her interest piqued despite herself. "Dorian Ashford. He was such a handsome young man. The Golden Son, they called him. Set to take over the family business. Hotels and resorts all over the world." Betty sighed dramatically. "Now he hides away in that crumbling mansion. Some say he's gone mad with grief. Others say he can't stand for anyone to see his scars." Imani frowned. "That's terrible. Burns are painful, physically and emotionally. Well, no one knows for sure. No one's seen him since he moved here after the hospital. Just staff coming and going. His brother visits sometimes, that polished young executive type. But Dorian, he might as well be a ghost." Later that afternoon, dark clouds gathered over Seabreeze. Imani carefully packed a special order, a healing balm for Mrs. Peterson, who lived near the cliffs. As she locked up the shop, fat raindrops began to fall. "Just perfect," she muttered, pulling her jacket tighter around her shoulders. By the time she reached her old blue Jeep, the rain was coming down in sheets. She placed the balm carefully on the passenger seat and started the drive toward the cliffs. The windshield wipers worked frantically as Imani peered through the rain. The road wound upward, hugging the coastline. On one side, the angry Atlantic churned below. On the other, dense trees gave way occasionally to glimpses of grand homes set back from the road. "Mrs. Peterson said to take a right at the fork," Imani mumbled to herself, trying to make out landmarks through the downpour. She turned right at what she thought was the fork, but after 5 minutes of driving, the road narrowed and became unfamiliar. Tall, wrought-iron gates loomed ahead, partially obscured by overgrown vines. Beyond them, Imani could make out the silhouette of a massive house perched at the edge of the cliff. "This isn't right," she said, pulling over to check her phone. No signal. Great. She'd have to turn around, but first she needed to figure out where she was. Grabbing her umbrella, she stepped out into the rain. The wind immediately caught the umbrella, nearly yanking it from her grasp. As she struggled to control it, her foot slipped in the mud, and she went down hard. "Ow!" Imani cried out, landing painfully on her side. The umbrella tumbled away, caught by the wind. "You okay?" The deep, gravelly voice came from somewhere near the gates. Imani squinted through the rain. A tall figure stood in the shadows, hooded and mostly hidden. I'm fine," she called back, trying to stand but wincing as pain shot through her ankle. The figure hesitated, then moved forward. He kept his face turned away, the hood of his dark sweatshirt pulled low, but his hands, large and strong, reached out to help her up. "Thanks," Imani said, accepting his help. As she got to her feet, their eyes met briefly. In that fleeting moment, Imani saw it all. Pain, shame, and a loneliness so profound it took her breath away. Half of his face remained in shadow, but she caught a glimpse of angry red scars extending down his neck. She didn't gasp, didn't stare, just steadied herself and said, "I'm lost. I was trying to reach the Peterson place." "You're on the wrong road," he said, his voice rough as if rarely used. "You needed to take the second fork, not the first." "Thank you," she said simply. Then, before she could think better of it, she added, "I make something that could help with the ache, if you want." He stiffened, his face turning further away. "What ache?" "Burns," she said gently. "I have a balm. It won't erase scars, but it soothes the tightness, helps with mobility and pain." For a long moment he said nothing. Then, "You know who I am." "It wasn't a question." "I know you helped me when I fell," Imani replied. "That's enough for me." Rain continued to pour down around them. He was getting soaked, but he didn't seem to notice or care. "I'm Imani," she offered. "I run the apothecary in town." "Dorian," he said after a pause, confirming what she had already guessed. She nodded. "I'll bring the balm tomorrow. Leave it by the gate. No strings attached." Before he could refuse, she limped back to her car, feeling his eyes on her the whole way. The next day dawned clear and bright, as if the storm had never happened. Imani's ankle was tender but not sprained. As she worked in her shop, she prepared a special batch of balm, aloe, lavender, calendula, and a touch of vitamin E, perfect for burn scars. When the afternoon lull came, she drove back up to the cliffs, this time taking the correct turn to deliver Mrs. Peterson's order first. Then, on her way back, she stopped at the iron gates of Ashford Manor. No one was in sight as she placed the small jar by the gate, along with a handwritten note, "For the ache, no pressure. Imani." 3 days passed with no word. Imani tried not to think about the man with the haunted eyes and hidden face. She had her own healing to do, her own life to rebuild. On the 4th day, just as she was closing shop, a sleek black car pulled up outside. A man in a crisp suit stepped out, handsome, polished, with the confident air of someone used to getting his way. Unlike Dorian, this man seemed to want to be seen. "I'm looking for Imani Rhodes," he announced as he entered. "That's me," Imani replied, instantly wary. "Gavin Ashford," he said, extending a manicured hand. "I understand you left something for my brother." So this was Dorian's brother. The resemblance was there, but where Dorian had radiated pain and isolation, Gavin exuded ambition and calculation. "I did," she said simply. Gavin placed a thick envelope on the counter. "He asked me to deliver payment." Imani pushed it back. "It was a gift, no payment necessary." Gavin's smile didn't reach his eyes. "My brother isn't accustomed to charity, Ms. Rhodes." "It wasn't charity," Imani replied firmly. "Just kindness. There's a difference." Something flickered in Gavin's expression. Annoyance, perhaps. "Nevertheless, he insists." He pushed the envelope back toward her. "Then tell him he can pay it forward. Help someone else who needs it." Gavin studied her for a long moment, as if trying to figure out her angle. "You're new in town, aren't you? Let me give you some friendly advice. My brother values his privacy above all else. He's been through enough without becoming a project for someone looking to heal the wounded billionaire." Imani felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Is that what you think I'm doing?" "Aren't you?" Gavin countered smoothly. "The reclusive, scarred billionaire makes quite a romantic project." "Your brother helped me when I fell," Imani said evenly. "I offered a balm for burns. That's all. If he doesn't want it, fine. But don't come in here questioning my intentions when you know nothing about me." Gavin seemed taken aback by her directness. He recovered quickly, offering a practiced smile. "Forgive me. It's just that Dorian has been vulnerable since the accident. I'm protective." Imani wasn't convinced, but she nodded. "I understand. Please tell him there's no obligation and no expectations." After Gavin left, Imani locked up, troubled by the encounter. There had been something possessive in the way Gavin spoke about his brother, as if Dorian were an asset to be managed, rather than a person to be loved. A week passed. Imani threw herself into her work, creating new formulas and building relationships with the townspeople. She tried not to think about the brothers in the mansion on the cliff. Then, one rainy evening, as she was preparing to close, the bell above the door jingled. Imani looked up to find a tall figure in a dark hoodie standing awkwardly in the doorway. "We're about to—" The words died in her throat as the man turned slightly, revealing half of his face in the fading light. "Dorian." "The balm," he said quietly. It helped. Imani swallowed, trying not to stare at the angry scars that ran down the left side of his face and disappeared beneath his collar. They were severe, the skin tight and discolored, but she'd seen worse during her volunteer work at the burn unit in Atlanta. I'm glad, she said simply. He seemed at a loss for words, as if he hadn't planned beyond this initial statement. Finally, he added, My brother said you refused payment. It was a gift, Imani confirmed. No strings attached. Dorian shifted uncomfortably. I'm not used to that. To gifts? To people who want nothing in return. The raw honesty in his statement made Imani's heart ache. What kind of life had he led even before the fire that made him so suspicious of simple kindness? Well, get used to it, she said lightly. That's how we do things here in Seabreeze. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. The unscarred side. Is it? Or is that just how Imani Rhodes does things? You've been asking about me, she observed. He shrugged one shoulder. You asked about me first. Fair point. Imani motioned to the small seating area where customers sometimes waited. Would you like some tea? I was about to make some for myself. Dorian hesitated, glancing toward the door as if calculating his escape route. Finally, he gave a curt nod and moved toward the chairs, his movements stiff and careful. As Imani prepared the tea, she could feel his eyes on her, watchful and wary. She pretended not to notice how he positioned himself so that his scarred side was away from her. Your shop smells nice, he commented unexpectedly. Imani smiled. Lavender, rosemary, and a hint of citrus today. The scents change depending on what I'm working with. It's peaceful here. She handed him a steaming mug. That's the idea. A place for healing, inside and out. Dorian took the mug carefully, making sure their fingers didn't touch. Is that why you came to Seabreeze? To heal? Imani sat across from him, surprised by the perceptive question. Yes, actually. Atlanta was... I needed a fresh start. Away from what? She considered deflecting but decided on honesty. A job that consumed me. A relationship where I gave everything and got nothing back. The constant pressure to be who everyone needed me to be instead of who I am. Dorian nodded slightly as if he understood all too well. And who are you, Imani Rhodes? The question was asked without artifice or flirtation, a genuine inquiry from someone who seemed to have forgotten who he was himself. I'm still figuring that out, she admitted, but I know I'm someone who believes in healing, not just bodies but spirits too. I believe in second chances and new beginnings. I believe that sometimes the things that hurt us most can also set us free. She paused, suddenly self-conscious. Sorry, that sounds like something from a greeting card. No, Dorian said quietly. It sounds like something from someone who's known pain, but hasn't let it make her bitter. The observation hung between them, unexpectedly intimate. Imani changed the subject. Do you need more balm? I can make another batch. Yes, he said, seeming relieved at the shift to more practical matters. It's the first thing that's really helped with the tightness. I'll make it tomorrow. Would you like to pick it up or... I'll come by, he said, then added quickly, after closing, if that's okay. Imani understood. He wasn't ready to face the curious stares of the townspeople. Of course. Same time tomorrow. Dorian nodded and rose to leave, his movements less stiff than when he'd arrived. At the door he paused. Thank you, Imani. Not just for the balm. For what, then? His eyes met hers fully for the first time. For not looking away. After he left, Imani stood in the empty shop, her heart beating a little faster than normal. There was something about Dorian Ashford, something beyond his scars and his tragic story, something that called to the part of her that had always tried to fix broken things. But that was dangerous territory. She'd lost herself trying to heal Mark, pouring everything into a relationship that left her empty. She couldn't make the same mistake again. Yet as she locked up and headed home, she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward the scarred billionaire, not because he needed fixing, but because beneath his wounds, she sensed a kindred spirit, someone else searching for a way forward after everything they'd known was burned away. The next day, as rain once again pelted the windows of her shop, Imani carefully prepared a fresh batch of healing balm. This time, she added a special blend of essential oils known to help with scar tissue. As she worked, she found herself wondering about the man who would soon return for it, wondering what music he liked, what made him laugh, what dreams he'd had before the fire changed everything. And for the first time since leaving Atlanta, Imani felt something new taking root inside her, not just healing but hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, there was something waiting on the other side of pain, something the fire didn't burn. True to his word, Dorian returned to the shop the following evening. just as Imani was flipping the sign to closed. This time he seemed marginally more at ease, though he still kept his hood up and his scarred side angled away from the windows. "I made you something stronger," Imani said, handing him a larger jar. "This one has additional oils that help with mobility and scar tissue." Dorian took the jar, his fingers brushing against hers. Unlike before, he didn't flinch at the contact. "Thank you," he said quietly. Then, after a pause, do you have time for tea again?" Imani smiled. "I'd like that." As they sat with their steaming mugs, Dorian seemed to be gathering his courage. Finally, he pushed his hood back slightly, not completely, but enough that she could see more of his face. The scars extended from his left temple down his cheek and neck, disappearing beneath the collar of his shirt. The skin was red and tight, with areas of puckering that suggested multiple surgeries. "It's worse on my shoulder and chest," he said matter-of-factly, watching her face for a reaction. "The doctors said I was lucky. If I'd been in the room another minute, I wouldn't have made it out at all." "Your parents?" Imani asked gently. Pain flashed in his eyes. "They were in the central part of the house when the fire broke out. I was in my old bedroom packing up some childhood things my mother wanted to keep." His voice grew distant. "I heard the explosion. Something in the kitchen," they said later. "By the time I got to the hallway, the flames were everywhere. I tried to reach them, but..." He swallowed hard. "A beam fell. That's how I got these." He gestured to his scars. "Security pulled me out, but it was too late for my parents." "I'm so sorry, Dorian," Imani said softly. He looked away. "The worst part is I was supposed to be downstairs with them. If I had been, maybe I could have helped them get out, or maybe we would have all died together. Either way would be better than..." His voice broke off. "Than being the one left behind," Imani finished for him. "With all the guilt and what-ifs." Dorian's eyes met hers, surprised at her understanding. "Yes, exactly that." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his confession hanging in the air between them. "Is that why you hide away?" Imani finally asked. "Because of the guilt?" Dorian gave a harsh laugh. "Partly, but also because of this." He gestured to his scarred face. "You should have seen the looks I got after the accident. The pity, the revulsion. Even my own family couldn't stand to look at me. My brother Gavin suggested I take time to heal before returning to the company. That was 3 years ago. And you haven't been back since." Dorian shook his head. "What would be the point? The Ashford Empire was built on image. Perfect hotels, perfect service, perfect faces in the advertisements. I used to be the poster boy, the handsome heir apparent." His tone was bitter. "Now I'm a liability, bad for the brand." "That's ridiculous," Imani said firmly. "Scars don't define who you are." "Don't they?" Dorian challenged. "In my world, appearances are everything. The first thing people see when they look at me now is damaged goods." "Then they're not looking hard enough," Imani replied. "When I look at you, I see someone who survived. Someone who's carrying a lot of pain, yes, but who's still here, still fighting." Dorian stared at her for a long moment, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. "What else do you see?" The question hung in the air, charged with unexpected intimacy. "I see someone who helped a stranger in the rain," Imani said softly. "Someone who could have stayed hidden but chose to come back. Someone who's maybe ready to stop hiding." Their eyes held, and something shifted between them, a recognition perhaps of kindred spirits wounded in different ways, but still seeking healing. The moment was broken by Imani's phone buzzing. She glanced at it and frowned. "Everything okay?" Dorian asked. "It's nothing," she said, putting the phone away. "Just someone I'd rather not hear from." Dorian nodded, not pressing. He stood to leave, pulling his hood back up. "Thank you for the balm." "And the conversation." "Any time," Imani said, meaning it. At the door, he paused. "Imani, would it be okay if I ordered some other things from your shop? I've been having trouble sleeping, and I noticed you have some natural remedies for that." "Of course," she said, pleased. "Just let me know what you need." He nodded and slipped out into the night, but not before she caught the ghost of a smile on his lips. The next morning, a courier delivered an envelope to Imani's shop. Inside was a note in masculine handwriting. "Could you recommend something for insomnia, and perhaps something for headaches? I find the medication the doctors prescribed leaves me foggy. D.A." Imani smiled and wrote back on her shop stationery. "For sleep, lavender and chamomile tea, 2 drops of valerian tincture. For headaches, peppermint oil at the temples, feverfew capsules as needed. Both included. No fog, I promise. Imani." She packed the items carefully along with her note and gave them to the courier who returned that afternoon. 2 days later, another note arrived. The sleep tea worked wonders. First decent rest in months. The peppermint oil has a scent that reminds me of summers at the beach before everything. Thank you for that unexpected gift, D.A. Imani found herself grinning as she penned her reply. Sleep is healing. So are good memories. Hold on to those beach days. They're still part of you, same as everything else. Imani, she added a small vial of citrus oil to her package. For brightening dark days, she wrote on the label. Their note exchanges continued over the next few weeks. Each time Dorian ordered something new, he included a personal message, and Imani always responded with her own. Gradually, their notes became longer, more personal. He told her about books he was reading. She shared stories about her customers and her life before Seabreeze. One evening, as Imani was closing up, Gavin Ashford appeared again, his expensive suit as impeccable as before. "Miss Rhodes," he said with a practiced smile, "I see you've been busy filling orders for my brother." Imani maintained a pleasant expression. "Dorian seems to find my products helpful." "Yes, he's mentioned that." Gavin's tone was light, but his eyes were calculating. "He's also mentioned your conversations. Is there something wrong with that?" Gavin stepped closer, dropping his voice. "Look, I appreciate what you're trying to do. Really, I do. It's been good to see Dorian showing interest in something again, but I need to be clear, my brother is in a vulnerable state. He's been isolated for a long time. It would be easy for someone to take advantage of that." Imani felt her temper rising. "Take advantage? By being friendly? By treating him like a human being instead of some damaged thing to be hidden away? You don't understand the pressure he's under," Gavin countered smoothly. "The media has been relentless since the accident. The company shareholders are anxious. Right now, Dorian needs stability and privacy, not complications. And I'm a complication." Imani crossed her arms. "Any emotional attachment would be yes." Gavin's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Dorian isn't ready for that kind of involvement. Surely you can see that." "I think Dorian can decide that for himself," Imani replied firmly. Gavin's expression hardened slightly. "Has he told you about his fiancée?" Imani felt as if she'd been slapped. "Fiancée?" "Sophia Barrett. They were engaged before the accident. She's been waiting patiently for him to recover." Gavin watched her face closely. "He didn't mention her." "No," Imani managed, her chest tight. "He didn't. I'm not surprised. It's a painful subject for him. She's been incredibly understanding about his condition, about his need for space. But they have history, plans." Imani forced herself to remain composed. "I'm just his herbalist, Mr. Ashford. Nothing more." Gavin's smile returned, victorious. "I'm glad we understand each other. Dorian has enough to deal with without mixed signals from a friend." After he left, Imani sat heavily in the chair where she and Dorian had shared tea. Her fiancé. Of course, a man like Dorian would have someone. Someone from his world, someone beautiful and patient, someone waiting for him to emerge from his isolation. She felt foolish for the way her heart had started to quicken whenever his notes arrived, for the extra care she took with each package she prepared for him, for the hope that had begun to bloom inside her. "Just business," she reminded herself firmly. "That's all it is." But that night, as she lay awake in her small apartment above the shop, Imani couldn't stop thinking about Dorian, about the pain in his eyes when he talked about the fire, about the small smile that sometimes crossed his lips when he let his guard down. Fiancé or not, she couldn't deny the connection she felt to him. Her phone buzzed and she grabbed it, half hoping it was somehow Dorian. Instead, she saw a familiar name that made her stomach knot. Dad. The text read, "Imani, I know it's been a long time. I've been trying to reach you. Please call. I've changed. I want to make things right." Imani turned off the phone without responding. Michael Rhodes had walked out on her and her mother when Imani was 8 years old. For years he'd made promises to visit, to send money, to be a father, promises he'd broken every time. The last she'd heard, he was in California with his new family, apparently having forgotten he had a daughter at all. "Not tonight," she whispered to the darkness. "I can't deal with you tonight." The next morning, a courier arrived with the now familiar envelope. Imani opened it with less enthusiasm than usual, Gavin's revelations still fresh in her mind. The note read, "Imani, I've been thinking about our conversations, about what you said regarding not looking away. I've been hidden for so long, I've forgotten what it feels like to be seen. Would you consider visiting me at the house? I understand if you're not comfortable with that, but I find myself wanting to talk with you in person, not just through these notes. Dorian." Imani read the note 3 times. her emotions in turmoil. She wanted to see him, wanted it more than she cared to admit, but Gavin's words echoed in her mind. Fiancé, plans, vulnerable. Was she setting herself up for more heartbreak? Was she reading too much into Dorian's invitation? After wrestling with her thoughts all day, Imani finally wrote back, "I'd like that." When? The response came swiftly. "Tomorrow evening, 7 p.m. The gates will be open. D." As Imani closed her shop the next day, her nerves were on edge. She'd changed outfits 3 times before settling on a simple blue dress that brought out the warmth in her brown skin. She told herself it didn't matter what she wore. This wasn't a date, just a conversation between friends, client and herbalist. She wasn't sure anymore. The drive up to Ashford Manor felt different this time. The iron gate stood open as promised, and the long winding driveway led her through manicured grounds that showed signs of recent attention. The mansion itself was a sprawling structure of stone and glass, perched at the edge of the cliff, with the Atlantic spread out beyond it. Imani parked her jeep and approached the massive front door, her heart pounding. Before she could knock, the door swung open. Dorian stood there, his scarred face fully visible in the warm light from inside. He wore a simple black sweater and jeans, his dark hair neatly combed. Without his hood, she could see more of him, the strong line of his jaw on the unscarred side, the intensity of his eyes, the proud way he held himself despite his obvious discomfort at being so exposed. "You came," he said, his voice betraying surprise and relief. "I said I would," Imani replied simply. He stepped back to let her in. "I wasn't sure. After your conversation with Gavin," Imani froze. "You know about that?" Dorian's expression was unreadable. "He mentioned he spoke with you. He didn't give details, but I could guess. My brother thinks he's protecting me." "Is he?" Imani asked carefully. "From what? Someone who actually looks at me instead of through me? Someone who treats me like a person instead of a problem to be managed?" Dorian shook his head. "No, he's not protecting me. He's protecting the company, the Ashford image." He led her through a grand foyer into a spacious living room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean. The room was tastefully decorated, but felt lived in, with books stacked on side tables and a throw blanket draped over one of the couches. "Would you like something to drink?" Dorian offered. "Wine, or I have that chamomile tea you recommended." "Tea would be nice," Imani said, still taking in her surroundings. While Dorian went to prepare the tea, Imani wandered to the windows. The view was breathtaking, waves crashing against the rocks below, the last rays of sunset painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. "It's beautiful," she said, when Dorian returned with 2 steaming mugs. "It's why I chose this place," he admitted, handing her a mug. "After the fire, after all the surgeries and physical therapy, I couldn't go back to Atlanta. Too many memories. Too many people who knew the old Dorian. I needed somewhere quiet, somewhere I could, I don't know, find myself again, I guess." "And have you found yourself?" Dorian considered the question. "Parts of myself, but I'm still looking for the rest." He gestured for her to sit, taking a chair opposite her. "What about you? Have you found what you were looking for in Seabreeze?" "I've found peace," Imani said thoughtfully. "Purpose. The shop gives me that, but, she smiled wryly, "but peace isn't the same as happiness, is it? It's just the absence of chaos." Dorian nodded, understanding in his eyes. "That's exactly it. I've found quiet here, but not joy. Not until—" He broke off, looking almost embarrassed. "Not until what?" Imani prompted gently. "Not until your notes started arriving," he admitted, his gaze direct despite the flush creeping up his neck. "They gave me something to look forward to, something to think about besides my scars and my losses." Imani felt warmth spread through her chest, but Gavin's words still echoed in her mind. "Dorian, your brother mentioned something I think we should talk about," his expression guarded. "What did he say?" "He told me about your fiancée, Sophia." Dorian stared at her for a moment, then let out a short, bitter laugh. "Of course he did. My brother, always manipulating the situation." "So it's not true?" Imani asked, hope rising in her despite herself. "Sophia and I were engaged before the accident, yes," Dorian confirmed, making Imani's heart sink. "But afterward, when I was still in the hospital, she made it very clear she wasn't signing up for life with—" He gestured to his scars. "This. She left you because of your scars?" Imani was horrified. She said she couldn't handle it, the medical issues, the public attention, the changes in our future plans. She returned the ring with a note saying she needed space. The pain in his voice was raw. "I never heard from her again." "I'm so sorry," Imani said softly. Dorian's eyes were distant. "The funny thing is, I don't blame her. Not really. She fell in love with the golden son, the charming, unblemished heir to the Ashford fortune. That man died in the fire along with my parents. No, Imani said firmly. That man is still here. Changed, yes. Scarred, yes. But still Dorian, still worthy of love. He looked at her then, really looked at her, with an intensity that made her breath catch. Do you really believe that? I do, she said without hesitation. Dorian set his mug down and stood, moving to the window. His profile was strong against the darkening sky. Gavin doesn't want me back in the public eye. He says it's to protect me, but I know better. The company's stock took a hit after the accident. People want to know what happened to the heir apparent. If I came back like this, he touched his scarred cheek, it would raise questions, remind people of the tragedy, bad for business. So he keeps you hidden away, Imani said, anger rising in her. While he runs things his way. Dorian turned to face her. He's been pushing me to sign over my shares. Says it would be less stressful for me if I didn't have to worry about the business. And what do you want? The question seemed to surprise him, as if no one had asked him that in a very long time. I want... He paused, searching for words. I want to matter again. I want purpose. I want to stop hiding and start living. Imani stood and moved toward him, stopping just short of touching him. Then do it. Start with small steps. You've already taken the first one by inviting me here. What would the next step be? He asked, his voice low. That depends on what you want, Imani said softly. Dorian's eyes dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken possibility. Right now, he murmured. I want... The moment was shattered by the sound of the front door opening and closing with a bang. Dorian, Gavin's voice called from the foyer. We need to talk about the quarterly reports. The board is asking questions again. Dorian stepped back from Imani, his expression closing off. In here, he called back, his voice tight. Gavin strode into the room, stopping short when he saw Imani. His surprise quickly morphed into a cold smile. Ms. Rhodes, what an unexpected pleasure. I invited her, Dorian said firmly. I see. Gavin's eyes narrowed slightly. Well, I don't want to interrupt, but when you're finished, Dorian, we really do need to discuss those reports. The board is getting restless. I should go anyway, Imani said, not wanting to create more tension. Thank you for the tea, Dorian, and the view. Dorian looked like he wanted to ask her to stay, but nodded instead. I'll walk you out. At the front door, away from Gavin's watchful eyes, Dorian took her hand. I'm sorry about the interruption. Gavin has always had terrible timing. It's okay, Imani assured him. Another time. Tomorrow, Dorian asked quickly. Come back tomorrow. There's something I want to show you. The hope in his eyes was impossible to resist. Tomorrow, she agreed. As she drove back down the winding road, Imani couldn't stop thinking about what might have happened if Gavin hadn't interrupted them. The way Dorian had looked at her, the connection she felt to him. It was more than friendship, more than the bond between healer and patient. And for the first time since leaving Atlanta, Imani allowed herself to imagine possibilities beyond her small shop and quiet life. Possibilities that included a scarred billionaire with haunted eyes and a heart that maybe, just maybe, was starting to heal. What she didn't see as she drove away was Gavin watching from an upstairs window, his expression cold as he made a phone call. She's becoming a problem, he said into the phone. We need to deal with this now. The next evening, Imani found herself once again driving up to Ashford Manor, her stomach fluttering with anticipation. She'd spent extra time on her appearance, choosing a flowing green dress that made her feel confident. This time Dorian was waiting outside for her, standing tall despite his obvious discomfort at being so exposed. The evening sun cast a golden light on his features, softening the angry red of his scars. You came back, he said, relief evident in his voice. Imani smiled as she stepped out of her car. I said I would. After Gavin's interruption yesterday, I wasn't sure. He offered his arm, a surprisingly old-fashioned gesture that made her heart warm. I want to show you something. Instead of leading her into the house, Dorian guided her around the side of the mansion toward the cliff's edge. A winding stone path led down to a sheltered cove where a small greenhouse gleamed in the fading light. My mother loved gardening, Dorian explained as they walked. This was her special place. After the fire, I couldn't bear to come here. It sat empty for years. But lately, he glanced at Imani. Lately, I've been thinking about growing things again. The greenhouse was beautiful. Glass walls with wrought iron detailing, surrounded by stone planters. Inside, Imani was surprised to find freshly turned soil in the beds and small green shoots emerging. "You've been planting," she observed, touching a tiny seedling gently. "Herbs, mostly," Dorian admitted, looking almost shy. "After reading about what you use in your remedies, I thought I might try growing some. Lavender, chamomile, mint." Imani felt deeply touched. "This is wonderful, Dorian." He shrugged, but she could tell he was pleased by her reaction. "It gives me something to care for. Something that doesn't care about my scars or my past. Plants are honest that way," Imani agreed. "They only care about sunshine, water, and a little love." Dorian's eyes lingered on her face. "I've found that's true of the best people, too." The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken feelings. Then Dorian cleared his throat and moved to a potting bench, where a basket sat covered with a cloth. "I thought we might have dinner here," he said, removing the cloth to reveal wine, bread, cheese, and fruit. "If that's okay with you?" "It's perfect," Imani said softly. They sat together on a stone bench, talking as the sun set and stars appeared through the glass ceiling. Dorian seemed more relaxed than she'd ever seen him, laughing at her stories about demanding customers and sharing childhood memories of summers spent at the beach. "Before the accident, I never appreciated simple moments like this," he confessed, refilling her wineglass. "I was always focused on the next deal, the next acquisition, proving myself worthy of the Ashford name." "And now?" Imani asked. "Now I'm learning that worth isn't something you earn through achievements. It's something you already have." He looked at her intently. "You helped me see that, Imani." She felt a blush warming her cheeks. "I just reminded you of what you already knew." Dorian shook his head. "No, you saw me, really saw me, when everyone else was looking away. Do you know how rare that is?" Before Imani could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and frowned. "Everything okay?" Dorian asked. Imani sighed. "It's my father. He's been texting me for days." "You don't want to talk to him?" "He left when I was 8, Imani explained, putting the phone away. "Walked out on my mother and me without looking back. For years he'd make promises to visit, to send money, promises he never kept. I haven't heard from him in over a decade, and suddenly he wants to make things right." "People can change," Dorian said cautiously. "Some people," Imani agreed, "but my father has a pattern. He shows up when things are going well for me, when I have something he can use. In college, he appeared just in time to ask for money for his new business. When I got my marketing job in Atlanta, he suddenly wanted to reconnect, and then asked me to convince my company to hire his friend." Dorian's expression hardened. "I'm sorry. You deserve better. I've made peace with it," Imani said, though her tight smile suggested otherwise. "My mother taught me that you can't force someone to love you the way you need to be loved. You can only choose to spend your energy on people who give back as much as they take." "Your mother sounds wise." "She was." Imani's eyes grew sad. "She passed away 2 years ago. Cancer." Dorian reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "I'm sorry, Imani." She squeezed back, grateful for his understanding. "Enough about my family drama. Tell me more about your plans for this greenhouse." They talked late into the night, making plans for the garden, discussing herbs that might thrive in the coastal climate. It felt natural, comfortable, as if they'd known each other for years instead of weeks. When it was finally time for Imani to leave, Dorian walked her to her car. At the door he hesitated, then leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her cheek. "Thank you for coming tonight," he said softly, "for everything." Imani's heart raced at the brief contact. "I'll come back tomorrow, help you with the planting." His smile was worth every moment of uncertainty she'd felt. "I'd like that." As she drove home, Imani couldn't stop smiling. Whatever was happening between her and Dorian felt real and honest, nothing like the one-sided relationship she'd had with Mark, where she'd given everything and received little in return. Her good mood lasted until she pulled up to her shop and saw a figure waiting on the steps. As she got closer, her stomach dropped. Even after all these years, she'd recognized that silhouette anywhere. "Dad?" she called out, her voice wary. Michael Rhodes stood up, offering a tentative smile. At 56, he looked older than she remembered. His hair now grey at the temples, lines etched around his eyes. But the charming smile was the same one he'd used to make promises he never kept. "Imani," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "Look at you, all grown up and successful." "What are you doing here?" she asked, making no move to embrace him. "I told you I wanted to talk." He gestured to the shop. "You've done well for yourself. Your mother would be proud." The mention of her mother stung. "Don't. You don't get to talk about her." Michael's smile faltered. "I know I've made mistakes, Imani, terrible ones, but I'm trying to make amends. I'm sober now, 2 years. Part of my recovery is making things right with the people I've hurt. Imani crossed her arms. And what if I'm not ready to help you with your recovery? What if I don't want to be part of your redemption story? Pain flashed across his face. I deserve that. I do. But I'm not asking for forgiveness, Imani. Just a chance to show you I've changed, to be in your life again on whatever terms you set. Something in his eyes, a vulnerability she'd never seen before, made Imani hesitate. I need to think about it. That's fair, he said, handing her a business card. I'm staying at the Seabreeze Inn. Room 12, I'll be here for a week. He paused. I really have changed, Imani. I hope you'll give me the chance to prove it. After he left, Imani sat in her car for a long time, emotions warring inside her. The little girl who'd waited by the window for her father to show up for birthdays and holidays wanted to believe him. The grown woman who'd learned to live without him wasn't sure she could risk the pain again. The next morning, Imani was arranging a new display of bath salts when the bell above the door jingled. To her surprise, Dorian walked in, without his hood, in broad daylight. "Dorian," she exclaimed, moving quickly to his side. "You're out. In town." He looked nervous but determined. "Small steps, remember? I figured your shop was a safe place to start." Pride swelled in Imani's chest. "I'm so glad you're here. I brought coffee," he said, holding up 2 cups. "And I thought maybe you could show me around town afterward, if you're not too busy." The idea of walking through Seabreeze with Dorian, helping him face the stares and whispers, made her heart ache with tenderness. "I'd love to. Let me just put up the 'back in 30 minutes' sign." As they strolled through the small coastal town, Imani noticed the curious glances cast their way. Some people stared openly at Dorian's scars, while others quickly looked away. But Dorian held his head high, his hand firmly holding hers. They stopped at the local bookstore where the elderly owner, Mrs. Finch, treated Dorian with the same gruff kindness she showed everyone. At the bakery, Mr. Patel didn't bat an eye at Dorian's appearance, simply recommending his famous cinnamon rolls with the same enthusiasm he always did. "See?" Imani said, as they sat on a bench overlooking the harbor, sharing a paper bag of warm pastries. "Not so terrible. It's easier with you," Dorian admitted. "But you're right. Most people are just curious, not cruel. The world isn't as scary as we sometimes imagine it to be," Imani said softly. "And you're braver than you give yourself credit for." Dorian's eyes met hers. "You make me brave, Imani." The moment was interrupted by a familiar voice. "Well, well." The prodigal son emerges. Gavin Ashford stood before them, immaculate in a tailored suit that seemed out of place in the casual seaside town. His smile was tight as he looked between Dorian and Imani. "Gavin?" Dorian said, his posture stiffening. "What are you doing here?" "Looking for you, actually. You weren't answering your phone." Gavin's gaze lingered on their joined hands. "The board is meeting tomorrow. They want to discuss the future of the company and your role in it." "I'll be there," Dorian said firmly. Surprise flashed across Gavin's face. "You will?" "Yes. It's time I stopped hiding. Time I took back my place in the company." Gavin's smile didn't reach his eyes. "That's wonderful news, brother. But are you sure you're ready? After all this time away, the business has changed. The media attention will be intense." "I can handle it," Dorian said, squeezing Imani's hand. Gavin's gaze hardened. "I see. Well, I look forward to having you back." He turned to Imani. "Ms. Rhodes, might I have a word with you? In private?" Imani glanced at Dorian, who nodded. "I'll wait here," he said. Gavin led Imani a short distance away, his pleasant expression dropping as soon as they were out of Dorian's earshot. "What exactly are you playing at?" he demanded, his voice cold. "Excuse me?" Imani bristled. "My brother was content in his solitude until you came along. Now suddenly he wants to rejoin the company, appear in public. Do you have any idea what that could do to him? To us? To him or to your control of the company?" Imani countered. Gavin's eyes narrowed. "You know nothing about our business or what's best for Dorian. He's not ready for the scrutiny, the pressure. One bad interview, one cruel comment about his appearance, and he'll retreat again, more damaged than before." "You don't give him enough credit," Imani said firmly. "Dorian is stronger than you think." "Is he? Or is he just infatuated with the first woman who didn't flinch at his scars?" Gavin stepped closer. "Let me be clear, Ms. Rhodes. If you care about my brother at all, you'll step back. Let him heal at his own pace, not push him into situations he's not equipped to handle." "Dorian makes his own decisions," Imani insisted. "Does he?" Gavin smiled coldly. Or is he just trying to impress you, to be the man he thinks you want him to be? He shook his head. When this all falls apart, and it will, he'll be devastated, and you'll have to live with that. Before Imani could respond, Gavin walked away, rejoining Dorian with a smile that betrayed none of the threat he'd just delivered. Later that evening, as Imani closed her shop, she couldn't shake Gavin's words. Was she pushing Dorian too fast? Was his sudden courage really about impressing her rather than genuine healing? Her worries were interrupted by a knock at the shop door. Through the glass, she saw her father standing there, looking uncertain. Against her better judgment, Imani unlocked the door. "We're closed." "I know," Michael said. I wanted to apologize properly for showing up unannounced yesterday, for everything." Imani sighed, gesturing for him to come in. "Say what you need to say." Michael entered cautiously, as if afraid she might change her mind. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about what a terrible father I was, about all the times I let you down." He met her eyes directly. "There's no excuse for what I did, Imani, none. I was selfish and weak." "Why now?" Imani asked, the question that had been burning inside her. "Why come back now?" "Because I'm finally strong enough to face what I did," he said simply. "To face you, to face myself." He pulled out a small worn photo from his wallet. Imani at her 8th birthday party, smiling gap-toothed at the camera. "I've carried this with me for 20 years, a reminder of everything I threw away." Imani felt tears threatening. "Do you know how long I waited for you? How many nights I sat by the window watching for your car? How many times Mom had to make excuses for why Daddy missed another Christmas, another school play?" "I know," Michael said, his own eyes glistening, "and I will regret that until the day I die. Your mother was an incredible woman. She raised an incredible daughter, without any help from me." He took a deep breath. "I don't expect forgiveness, Imani. I just want a chance to know the amazing woman you've become. On your terms, whatever boundaries you want to set." Imani studied the man before her, seeing both the father who had abandoned her and the broken human trying to make amends. "I need time, Dad. This isn't something I can decide tonight." He nodded, relief evident in his face at not being immediately rejected. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere this time. I promise." As he turned to leave, Imani called after him. "Why did you really come to Seabreeze? Of all the places you could have found me." Michael paused at the door. "Honestly, I heard about your shop from a friend in Atlanta, said his cousin raved about some miracle worker herbalist in this little coastal town. When I realized it was you," he shrugged, "it felt like a sign, a chance to make things right." After he left, Imani locked up, her emotions in turmoil. Between Dorian, Gavin's threats, and now her father's return, she felt overwhelmed. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dorian. "Thank you for today, for your courage, for lending me some when mine faltered. See you tomorrow at the greenhouse." The simple message centered her, reminding her of what mattered. Whatever Gavin's manipulations, whatever her father's intentions, what she and Dorian were building felt real and honest. "Wouldn't miss it," she texted back. "Sweet dreams." The next morning, Imani woke to another text from Dorian. "Board meeting at 10. Nervous but ready. Wish me luck." "You don't need luck," she replied. "Just be yourself, that's more than enough." Hours passed with no response. Imani tried to focus on her customers, but she couldn't help checking her phone every few minutes, wondering how the meeting was going. Had Dorian stood up to the board? Had Gavin undermined him? Just after noon, the bell above the shop door jingled, and Imani looked up hopefully. But it wasn't Dorian. It was a courier with an envelope. Inside was a short note in Dorian's handwriting. "Something's come up. Can't make the greenhouse today. Will explain later." The brief, impersonal message felt wrong. After the connection they'd shared, the warmth of their texts, this cold note seemed like a step backward. As the day wore on with no further word from Dorian, Imani's worry grew. When closing time came, she made a decision. She would drive to Ashford Manor and make sure Dorian was okay. The gates were closed when she arrived, but Imani pressed the intercom button firmly. "Yes?" came a crisp voice she didn't recognize. "I'm here to see Dorian Ashford," Imani said confidently. "Imani Rhodes." A long pause. "I'm sorry, Ms. Rhodes. Mr. Ashford isn't available. Please tell him I'm here. It's important." Another pause. "I've been instructed not to disturb him. Perhaps you could call tomorrow." Frustrated, Imani returned to her car. Something was wrong. She could feel it. This wasn't like Dorian. She was about to leave when she remembered the path to the greenhouse. It wound around the side of the property, away from the main gates. If she parked down the road a bit. 20 minutes later, Imani was making her way carefully along the cliff path, the setting sun casting long shadows. As she approached the greenhouse, she saw a light inside. Her heart quickened. Through the glass walls, she could see Dorian sitting alone on the stone bench, head in his hands. He looked defeated, shoulders slumped in a way she'd never seen before. Imani knocked gently on the glass door. Dorian's head snapped up, surprise and something like shame crossing his features when he saw her. "Imani," he said as she entered, "how did you get here?" "I was worried about you," she said simply. "What happened at the meeting?" Dorian laughed bitterly. "What happened? Gavin happened. He showed up with financial reports I'd never seen, projections suggesting my return to the company would cause a stock plunge. He had statements from our major partners expressing concern about my condition. He had it all planned perfectly." Anger burned in Imani's chest. "And the board believed him. They didn't have to. He made sure I believed it." Dorian ran a hand through his hair. "He was right, Imani. I'm not ready. I was fooling myself thinking I could just walk back in after 3 years and pick up where I left off." "That's not true," Imani insisted, sitting beside him. "Gavin is manipulating you." "Maybe, but what if he's also right? What if my reappearance does damage the company? What if I can't handle the pressure, the scrutiny?" He turned to her, eyes anguished. "What if I'm just doing this for the wrong reasons?" "What reasons would those be?" Dorian looked away. "To impress you. To be the man I think you deserve, instead of a recluse hiding from the world." So Gavin had gotten to him after all. Imani took Dorian's face gently in her hands, turning him to look at her. "Listen to me. You don't need to impress me. I'm already impressed by your courage, your kindness, your resilience. Whether you run a global company or tend your greenhouse in private, I care about you, Dorian. The real you." His eyes searched hers. "How can you be so sure of me when I'm not sure of myself?" "Because I see you," Imani said simply. "Not the scars, not the billionaire, not the recluse. Just Dorian, and that man is worth believing in." Dorian's hand came up to cover hers where it rested against his cheek. "Gavin says I'm not thinking clearly, that I'm rushing into things because of you. And what do you think?" "I think," he paused, gathering his thoughts. "I think for the first time in 3 years I'm actually thinking clearly. I'm not letting fear control my decisions. I'm starting to remember who I was before the fire, not just the businessman, but the person, the man who had dreams beyond the company, who wanted to make a difference in the world." He turned his hand to interlace his fingers with hers. "And that's because of you, Imani. Not because I'm trying to impress you, but because you reminded me that I'm still here, still alive, still worthy of having a life beyond these scars." Relief flooded through Imani. "That's the Dorian I know. But Gavin isn't wrong about everything," he admitted. "I do need to take things slowly with the company, build back gradually, show them I'm still capable." "One step at a time," Imani agreed, "just like with the greenhouse." Dorian smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him today. "Speaking of which, I have something to show you." He led her to the back of the greenhouse where several lavender plants were thriving. "They started blooming this morning. I wanted it to be a surprise." Imani touched the delicate purple blossoms. "They're beautiful, Dorian. Just like their caretaker," he said softly, his eyes never leaving her face. This time, when he leaned toward her, there was no interruption. His lips met hers in a gentle, questioning kiss that quickly deepened as Imani responded. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer, while her hands came up to touch his face, both the smooth skin and the scarred. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Dorian rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the day you didn't look away," he confessed. "I've wanted you to," Imani admitted with a smile. The sound of footsteps on the stone path outside made them both turn. Gavin stood in the doorway, his expression thunderous as he took in the scene before him. "I should have known," he said coldly. "Brother, we need to talk, now." Dorian straightened, his arms still around Imani's waist. "Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of Imani." Gavin's smile was dangerous. "Fine, have it your way." He pulled out his phone, tapping the screen before holding it up. "Perhaps you'd like to explain this." On the screen was a news article with the headline, "Scarred Ashford heir finds love with gold-digging herbalist." Below it was a photo of Imani and Dorian from their walk in town, clearly taken without their knowledge. "What is this?" Dorian demanded. "It seems your new friend has been selling your story to the tabloids," Gavin said smoothly. "Trading on your pain for her 15 minutes of fame." "That's a lie," Imani gasped. "I would never." The reporter says his source was close to Ms. Rhodes, Gavin continued, scrolling through the article. Someone who knew all about your budding romance. Someone who knew private details about your accident, your recovery. A cold feeling settled in Imani's stomach. My father, she whispered. Dorian looked at her sharply. What? My father showed up in town a few days ago, Imani explained, her mind racing. He said he wanted to make amends, but he's done this before. Used me for money, for connections. How convenient, Gavin said skeptically. Blame the estranged father. Dorian's expression was unreadable. Did you tell your father about us? About my accident? No, Imani insisted. I barely spoke to him, but he might have heard things in town. People talk. They certainly do, Gavin agreed with false sympathy, especially when encouraged by promises of payment. He turned to Dorian. I warned you she was after something. Your money, your story, it doesn't matter. She used you just like everyone else. Dorian's grip on Imani's waist had loosened. The doubt in his eyes broke her heart. Dorian, you know me, she pleaded. You know I would never do this. Do I? He asked quietly. We've known each other for such a short time, and you've been so eager to help me rejoin the world. Because I care about you. Tears stung Imani's eyes. Not because of some tabloid story. Gavin stepped closer. Brother, I hate to see you hurt again, but better to know the truth now before you get in any deeper. Dorian looked between Gavin and Imani, conflict evident in his expression. I need time to think, he said finally. Alone. The dismissal stung worse than any accusation. Imani stepped back, fighting tears. If you believe I would do this, then you don't know me at all. She walked out of the greenhouse with her head held high, even as her heart crumbled. Behind her she heard Gavin's smooth voice. I'm sorry, brother, I truly am, but I did try to warn you. In her car, Imani finally let the tears fall. She had opened her heart again, only to have it broken by mistrust and manipulation. The parallel to her relationship with Mark wasn't lost on her. Once again, she'd given her heart to someone who couldn't fully believe in her when it mattered most. As she drove away from Ashford Manor, Imani made a decision. She wouldn't wait for Dorian to decide if she was trustworthy. She would prove it by finding out who really sold their story to the tabloids, and she had a pretty good idea where to start looking. Imani drove straight to the Sea Breeze Inn, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Anger and hurt fueled her as she parked and marched into the lobby. Room 12, she told the receptionist, not bothering with pleasantries. The woman pointed down the hall. He's in, honey. Saw him come back not 30 minutes ago. Imani knocked sharply on the door. When Michael opened it, his welcoming smile quickly faded at the sight of her tear-stained face. Imani? What's wrong? She pushed past him into the small room. How could you? I gave you a chance to prove you'd changed, and this is what you do. Michael looked genuinely confused. What are you talking about? The tabloid story, Imani said, throwing her phone at him with the article displayed. About me and Dorian Ashford. Someone sold information to the press and Gavin Ashford is convinced it was you. Michael scanned the article, his confusion turning to outrage. And you believed him? You think I'd do this to you? Wouldn't you? Imani shot back. You've used me before when it suited you. What was it this time? Money? A quick payday at my expense? Imani, listen to me. Michael set the phone down and looked her in the eyes. I did not do this. I swear on your mother's memory. I would never hurt you like that. Something in his voice, a raw sincerity she'd never heard before, made Imani pause. Then who did? Michael sat heavily on the bed. I don't know. But if I had to guess, Gavin Ashford himself. Imani stared at him. What? Think about it. Who benefits most from driving a wedge between you and Dorian? Who's been trying to keep him isolated and under control? Who immediately pointed the finger at someone Dorian doesn't know? Someone who couldn't defend themselves. The pieces clicked into place. Gavin planted the story himself, Imani whispered. He needed someone to blame, and my estranged father was the perfect scapegoat. I may have been a terrible father, Imani, but I'm not a monster. Michael's eyes were pleading. I came here to make things right, not destroy your life. Imani sat beside him, suddenly exhausted. I wanted to believe you'd changed. I just couldn't risk being hurt again. I know. Michael tentatively placed his hand over hers. And I don't blame you for suspecting me. I've earned that distrust, but I'm not that man anymore, Imani, I promise you that. Looking into her father's eyes, Imani made a decision. Help me prove it wasn't you. Help me expose Gavin. For the first time in her memory, Michael Rhodes stepped up when she needed him. Tell me what to do. Together, they formulated a plan. Michael would use his journalistic contacts from his years in publishing to trace the source of the story. Imani would gather evidence of Gavin's other manipulations. "One more thing," Michael said as Imani prepared to leave. "I know I have no right to give you advice, but don't give up on Dorian. If he loves you, he'll see through his brother's lies." "I don't know if he does love me," Imani admitted. "We've known each other such a short time." Michael smiled sadly. "Sometimes it doesn't take long to recognize something real. I knew your mother was the one after our first date. My biggest regret is that I was too weak to be the man she deserved." For 3 days, Imani heard nothing from Dorian. She threw herself into gathering evidence against Gavin, working with her father to track down the source of the tabloid leak. The shop provided some distraction, but her heart ached with every passing hour of silence from the mansion on the cliff. On the 4th day, Michael burst into the shop just before closing, waving a piece of paper triumphantly. "We got him," he announced. "My buddy at the Chronicle traced the payment for the story. It went to a shell company that leads straight back to Gavin Ashford. He paid for the hit piece on his own brother." Relief flooded through Imani. "We need to tell Dorian." "There's more," Michael continued. "I did some digging into the Ashford Company records, public filings, shareholder reports. Gavin has been systematically transferring assets and decision-making power to himself since the accident. He's been planning to push Dorian out completely. How do we get this information to Dorian? He won't take my calls." Before Michael could answer, the bell above the shop door jingled. They turned to find Betty Tucker, the town gossip, practically vibrating with excitement. "Imani, dear, have you heard? The Ashford Company is holding a big gala tonight at the Seabreeze Hotel. Everyone who's anyone will be there. Gavin Ashford is announcing a new resort development right here in our town." Imani and Michael exchanged looks. "That's it," Imani said. "That's where we'll confront him." Betty leaned forward conspiratorially. "I heard Dorian Ashford might make an appearance too. First public event since the accident, can you imagine?" After Betty left, Imani turned to her father. "I need to get into that gala." Michael smiled. "Leave that to me. I know the hotel manager from my reporting days." 3 hours later, Imani stood outside the grand ballroom of the Seabreeze Hotel, wearing a borrowed emerald gown that made her dark skin glow. Her father had come through, securing service staff credentials that got them in through the kitchen. "Remember," Michael whispered, "wait for the right moment. Too early and Gavin will shut it down. Too late and the damage will be done." Imani nodded, her eyes scanning the crowded room for Dorian. Elegantly dressed guests mingled, champagne flowed, and photographers circulated capturing the elite of the business world. Gavin stood near the podium at the front, charming and confident as he greeted investors. But there was no sign of Dorian. Had he decided not to come after all? Had Gavin convinced him to stay hidden away? Just as Imani was beginning to lose hope, a hush fell over the room. She turned to see what had captured everyone's attention. Dorian stood in the doorway, tall and proud. He wore an impeccably tailored black suit, his dark hair neatly styled. But what took Imani's breath away was that he had made no attempt to hide his scars. No hood, no strategic lighting, no turned profile. He faced the crowd directly, his scarred left side clearly visible to all. Gasps and whispers rippled through the room. Flashbulbs popped as photographers rushed to capture the moment. Gavin's smile froze on his face as he saw his brother. Dorian began walking through the crowd, nodding politely at the stunned faces around him. When his eyes found Imani across the room, he stopped. For a breathless moment, they simply looked at each other. Then, to her astonishment, he began walking directly toward her. "Imani," he said when he reached her, his voice carrying in the suddenly quiet room. "You're here." "I had to come," she said softly. "I need to tell you something important." "So do I," Dorian replied. But first, he was interrupted by Gavin, who had swiftly made his way over, his public smile firmly in place though his eyes were cold. "Dorian, what a surprise. We didn't expect you tonight." He placed a hand on his brother's arm, trying to guide him away. "Let me introduce you to some of our investors before the announcement." Dorian didn't move. "Actually, Gavin, I think it's time I made my own announcement." Alarm flashed across Gavin's face. "Brother, we agreed you'd take things slowly. This isn't the time for impulsive decisions." "It's exactly the time," Dorian countered. He turned to address the watching crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, for those who don't know me, I'm Dorian Ashford." The room fell completely silent, as all eyes fixed on him. 3 years ago, I survived the fire that took my parents' lives and left me with these scars. For too long, I've hidden away, ashamed of my appearance, afraid of your stares and whispers. His voice grew stronger. But I've recently been reminded that worth isn't measured by unblemished skin or a perfect image. Dorian's eyes found Imani again. Someone very wise showed me that what matters is how deeply we choose to live, how honestly we face our fears, how bravely we step back into the light after darkness has consumed us. Gavin stepped forward, his smile strained. We're all moved by your courage, Dorian, but perhaps we should continue with the scheduled program. Not yet, Gavin, Dorian said firmly. There's more to say. He turned back to the crowd. The Ashford Company was built on my parents' vision of hospitality that makes people feel truly seen and valued. For 3 years, I've neglected my responsibility to that vision. That ends tonight. Murmurs spread through the crowd as Gavin's expression darkened. Effective immediately, I am resuming my position as CEO of Ashford International. Dorian's voice was clear and confident. My first act will be to commission a full audit of all company activities and transfers since my accident. Gavin's face paled. You can't do that. The board has already been contacted, Dorian cut in. They've received some very interesting documentation about unauthorized asset transfers and questionable financial maneuvers. Imani watched as Gavin's composure finally cracked. You're making a mistake, he hissed. This isn't who you are anymore. The company needs a strong, whole leader, not a recluse who jumps back in after a few weeks of playing gardener with his new girlfriend. The venom in Gavin's voice shocked the onlookers. Dorian, however, remained calm. You're right about one thing, Gavin. I'm not who I was before the fire. I'm stronger, more compassionate, more aware of what truly matters. He looked around the room. I don't want your pity. I don't want your applause. I just want to live authentically, scars and all. He turned to Imani, extending his hand. And I want to live with you. Tears filled Imani's eyes as she stepped forward and took his hand. Behind them, Gavin's face contorted with fury. She's using you, he spat. She and her father sold your story to the tabloids. They're after the Ashford fortune. A collective gasp went through the room. Dorian's grip on Imani's hand tightened. That's another lie, Gavin, Dorian said evenly. Just like all the others you've told me since the accident. Michael stepped forward, holding up a folder. I have proof that Gavin himself planted that story. Bank transfers, email communications, all leading back to him. And I have copies of documents showing how he's been systematically siphoning control of the company away from Dorian, Imani added, all while convincing him he wasn't ready to return. The whispers grew louder as Gavin looked frantically around the room. This is absurd. You can't believe. Security, Dorian called, and 2 large men appeared at his side. Please escort my brother out. The board will be in touch regarding his future with the company. As Gavin was led away, still protesting, Dorian turned to face Imani fully. I'm sorry I doubted you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I've spent so long believing no one could see past these scars that when someone finally did, you were scared, Imani finished for him. I understand, Dorian. Fear makes us doubt the things we want most. I don't want to be afraid anymore, he said, taking both her hands in his. I don't want to hide from life or from love. The word hung between them, powerful and new. Love, Imani whispered. Yes, Dorian said simply. I love you, Imani Rhodes. You saw me when I was invisible. You believed in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. Imani's heart felt too full for her chest. I love you too, Dorian, not because you're stepping back into the world or standing up to Gavin, but because of who you are, scarred, healing, and utterly beautiful to me. Dorian leaned down and kissed her, right there in front of everyone. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment, but neither of them cared. They had both spent too long hiding. Dorian behind his scars, Imani behind her walls of self-protection. Now, together, they were stepping into the light. The next morning, their kiss was on the front page of every newspaper and gossip site. Scared billionaire finds love and reclaims empire, read the headlines. For once, the publicity didn't feel invasive to Dorian. It felt like freedom. In the weeks that followed, Dorian split his time between the company offices in Atlanta and Seabreeze. The audit revealed the full extent of Gavin's manipulations, millions diverted, partnerships sabotaged, and a systematic campaign to keep Dorian isolated and dependent. He always resented being the younger brother, Dorian explained to Imani as they sat in the greenhouse one evening. The fire gave him the opportunity he'd been waiting for. What will happen to him? Imani asked, her head resting on Dorian's shoulder. The board voted to remove him completely. There may be criminal charges depending on what else the investigators find. Dorian sighed. Part of me feels sorry for him despite everything. That's because you have a good heart, Imani said, kissing his cheek. It's one of the many reasons I love you. Their relationship deepened as spring turned to summer. Dorian helped Imani expand her business, using his business expertise to open a second shop on the grounds of the mansion. Imani, in turn, continued to help Dorian heal, not just his physical scars, but the emotional ones as well. Michael Rhodes stayed in Seabreeze, renting a small apartment near Imani's shop. Their relationship was still tentative, full of awkward moments and old hurts, but they were trying, one day at a time. He's really making an effort, Imani told Dorian as they walked along the beach one warm evening. He helped me set up the new inventory system at the second shop yesterday. Didn't ask for anything in return. People can change, Dorian said, squeezing her hand. Sometimes it takes losing everything to realize what matters. They stopped to watch the sunset, the orange glow painting the water and sand in fiery hues. Dorian turned to Imani, suddenly serious. I've been thinking about what you said when we first met, about the things that hurt us most sometimes setting us free. He took a deep breath. Before the fire, I was living someone else's version of my life. My father's vision for the company, my mother's social expectations, Sophia's idea of the perfect fiancé. I was successful, but empty. Imani listened, giving him space to find the words. The fire took everything I thought defined me, my looks, my parents, my certainty about the future. Dorian touched his scarred cheek. But in losing those things, I found myself, the real me, beneath all the expectations and appearances. And who is the real Dorian Ashford? Imani asked softly. He smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. A man who loves growing things, who values honesty over image, who wants to use his position to create real connection in a disconnected world. His gaze was tender as he looked at her. A man who loves a remarkable woman who sells healing in little jars and gives it freely from her heart. Dorian took both her hands in his. I don't want to rush, Imani. We both need time to heal, to build slowly, but I want you to know that I see a future with you, a life together. Tears of joy blurred Imani's vision. I see it too. So we'll take it one day at a time? He asked, pulling her close. One day at a time, she agreed, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. Later that night, they stood on the balcony of the mansion, looking out over the moonlit ocean. Dorian caught his reflection in the glass door, scars and all, and didn't look away. Behind him, Imani slipped her arms around his waist and rested her head against his back. Happy? She asked. Dorian turned in her embrace, drawing her close. More than I ever thought possible. He kissed her forehead gently, then whispered, Maybe the fire burned everything I wasn't, so I could finally become who I am. Imani looked up at him, her eyes shining with love. And who you are, Dorian Ashford, is absolutely perfect. As they held each other under the stars, both knew they had found something precious and rare. A love built not on fantasy or perfection, but on seeing and accepting each other completely. A love that had emerged from the ashes of their past pain, stronger and more beautiful because of the journey. A love that would last because it was real. A love that the fire didn't burn.